popular culture is an interesting one because when I started to write poetry and I started to read poetry, it was an element of life that seemed weirdly absent from a lot of the poetry I was reading. And it was only when I started to read more contemporary poets, particularly poets on the Salt publishing list, that I saw other poets communicating their ideas through popular culture references. And again, that really unlocked something for me, to be able to explore the world through popular culture. Now it makes complete sense to me, because when you think about it, you know, none of us live in a vacuum free of popular culture. It surrounds us. We're steeped in music, films, computer games, novels, characters, stories, visual art. I mean, all of this surrounds us and infuses our lives. And in particular, for me, it has always been how I've connected with the world and made sense of it, and it's what I've been interested in. You know, I had a very active imagination as a child. I copied every fantasy film I saw. I acted out all the scenes and learned all of the words and the dialogue, and I just completely live in a fantasy world, I think. It's what really makes my imagination work and makes me feel excited. So, and also it's how I've bonded with friends and family and strangers, is through popular culture and art and the things that humans create. So yeah, it makes complete sense to me to explore my poetry ideas through popular culture. My first memory of wanting to be a writer was when I was 12 years old, and my grandparents bought me Final Fantasy VII for my birthday. Final Fantasy VII being a computer game, or video game as they're now called, for the PlayStation console. This was a game that was full of imaginative visuals and imagery, emotive storytelling and engaging characters, and it just set my imagination alight, really. So I was obsessed with this game, and it really made me want to write stories. So I think I got an electronic typewriter for Christmas the same year from my grandparents, and just started to write stories over and over. I mean, they were all just copies of Final Fantasy VII, but I think particularly when you're young and trying to write creatively, you just replicate everything you've seen before until your reading starts to broaden and you develop your own ideas and your own style. So that's my earliest memory of wanting to write creatively. In terms of poetry, I don't really know why I started writing poetry. I just sat down and started writing poems one day. I don't really know why, but it's become the genre of writing that I most enjoy. Death Magazine is my debut collection, which was published with Salt in 2019. It's structured like a sort of lifestyle magazine with sections sort of titled like beauty and fitness and wellness and things like this. But it's kind of I suppose that the idea behind it is that it's kind of a lifestyle magazine from a slightly alternate dimension, or a lifestyle magazine that's been pulled inside out and all of the viscera and the guts are on the outside. I think it was very difficult to piece that collection together, because I've been writing poetry since about 2007, so some of the poems in the book go quite a way back, and then some of them are very recent, or were at the time, and it didn't become this sort of magazine concept until quite late in the day, really. I had a collection of poems that were very different in style. So I had some that were cut up poems and they were very surreal and strange, some that were quite personal, dealing with grief and illness and things like that, and then I had some that were almost sci-fi themed, sort of referring to the Alien movie franchise and ideas of artificial intelligence and things like this. So having all of these together, I couldn't quite see how they sat together as a collection, and it was only via sitting in a pub with my closest friend, getting drunk and discussing ideas that it sort of came about, that we were like, oh, you know, set it out like a magazine. So as all the best ideas seem to come in those situations, so that was really the bringing together of all of those poems. It's I think a key element of the collection is the comedy aspect. I think humour is very, very important to me. There's two sort of elements I think are very important to me as a writer, are imagination and humour. I think humour is quite undervalued in the arts, but it's very, very important. So when I was performing the book, when I was launching the book at the time in pubs and things, and reading it to audiences, my biggest fear was that nobody would laugh at the poems that were meant to be funny. But the fact that people did, they did laugh, they got the surreal images, they got the humour, and they did laugh and they did respond in that way, was really my answer, you know, that the book had worked. So that was a big concern for me, but it got a great response. Particularly dark humour, black comedy, those are the things that I really like. A lot of these characters in this book are quite deluded, or desperate to change themselves in the way they think is going to make them perfect, getting the perfect body. And some of the book is sort of saying, why is the perfect body just one covered in muscles? Why not a body with 7 extra eyes, or an ear on the back, or things that would actually make the body better? Some of the characters they don't have a head, or they're turning into crystal. I think it's kind of just a twist on that kind of perfect body beautiful idea, and looking at it through a more surreal and strange lens. In terms of reception, the book has done really, really well, better than I imagined it would. To be sort of quite cliche about it, it was longlisted for the Polaris First Book Prize. A poem from the book was highly commended in the forwards, and it's been well reviewed. I haven't read anyone completely trashing it yet. So yeah, the response has been amazing, and I'm just really, really grateful for that. Inspiration is a tricky one, I think. It's quite abstract. My biggest inspiration is music. I find that whatever is going on is quite subconscious. So I might put my headphones on and go for a walk, listening to some music, and all of these vivid images and certain phrases and lines that end up being poems will just sort of pop into my head. I think I like to not really overanalyze or overthink what comes into my head, and just write it and sort of see where it goes. I think sometimes if you overthink, you can suffocate the idea before it gets a chance to really be born. So, you know, I like to just listen to music a lot and see really what happens. I think I don't really like poems that are too obvious, too neatly tied up, and feel too easy. I think there's something to really sink your teeth into with a poem that has mystery and gaps for you to sort of contribute with your own imagination. I don't like stuff that's on the other end of the scale. I don't like stuff that's too abstract to the point where it leaves you cold and confused. I like poems that have a nice balance. They give enough to latch onto, but they also have this space for you to dream in, I suppose, and think about. I think with inspiration as well, my only real rule for myself as a writer is I need to be excited by what I'm writing. So I think that's a really good indicator, a really good sort of compass to go by, because, you know, we write but then it goes out and people read it, and we can't control the responses that readers have. So as long as you have enjoyed that thing you've written, as long as you have felt excited and you've loved it and you've enjoyed the process, that's all you can kind of do for yourself. If you're writing something and it feels like a real chore, a real slog, and you're not feeling that spark, I just don't see the point of doing it. So yeah, I have to go by that radar of excitement to be able to see a poem through and dedicate all of the time and effort that it needs to be something worth publishing. I am working on new projects this year. So last year I was asked by Aaron Kent of Broken Sleep Books to co-edit an anthology with him of poems inspired by video games, which it was really, really exciting. I loved the idea, and we had some really great, beautiful poems come in, which you know, we've picked them, we've arranged the order of the anthology, and it's going to be published in the summer. It's going to be published in two versions, so there'll be a red version which will contain new poems by Aaron, and then a green version which will contain new poems by me, and they don't appear in each other's version, if that makes sense. So it's kind of like a Pokemon Red Blue situation. So that's going to be really cool. And then later in the year, in November, I think, my second pamphlet will be published with Bad Betty Press. I won't say too much about it, but it's different to Death Magazine. It's a lot more personal, and I'm still in the process of kind of working on it and going through edits. But yeah, I'm really really excited and really happy to be publishing something with Bad Betty, because they're a great press. I think through the lockdowns that we've been going through, people have either been writing like there's no tomorrow, or I've read a lot of people on social media, you know, saying they can't do it, they're not motivated, they don't really feel up to it, and I really fall into the latter category. I think lockdown in some ways has given people like me more time to write and work on things, but at the same time being cut off from so much of the world and so much of the social world that used to spark ideas and used to get me motivated, having that taken away has really lowered my motivation. So it's difficult at the moment. I've got ideas for future things, but yeah, it's quite a difficult time, and I think at the moment the most important thing is that we just go with how we're feeling and don't push ourselves and don't stress ourselves out about things. So I'm just going with that, and when the poems are there and they're ready to be written, then I'll know and I'll write them.